with you, Zev. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back to Las Vegas. We go with us right now is billionaire investor who is supposed to be on the Titanic, but thank God he and his son were not. Jay Bloom and his son Sean was scheduled to join the Voyage to see the Titanic, and by the grace of God, he was spared from that going. So, Jay, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. First of all, we're very pleased that you're here with us. Now, you were invited for a fee, I think it's $250,000 per person, to join OceanGate CEO Scotland Rush, who was unfortunately killed in that tragedy, to participate in this submarine to visit the Titanic. How did you know Stockton Rush, and what's your connection, and how did it all come about that you were supposed to go on this submarine ride?
So I was introduced to Stockton about a year ago, and he told me about OceanGate and what he's doing, and he painted a very exciting picture about going to visit the wreck of the Titanic. Told me that less than 200 people have ever been to the dive site, and more people have been in space than have been down to the wreckage. My son, who's now 20, has been a longtime fan of the Titanic story, and I thought this would be exciting for me, and it would be an exciting thing to do for my son. So I told Stockton I was interested. We talked about it kind of conceptually from a year ago until about February of this year, and then February of this year we started talking about picking dates.
Now, did you, obviously your son did some due diligence on his homework and he found out things that were disturbing about it, but did you have any inkling when you were talking to him that there were some problems, some major problems dealing with this submarine?
Initially, no. There was he touted the safety of what he was doing. He said the industry has 35 years of history, submersibles, non-military, non-Navy, with zero accidents, zero injuries, much less fatalities. So he said it's perfectly safe and an exciting adventure, and he was painting a very rosy picture.
So what changed? So what did your son Sean discover that made you decide maybe we should not be going on this trip, on this voyage to the bottom of the sea?
Well, it was a series of discoveries. He told a friend about it. His friend said that thought he was a bit crazy, and they started to research it. They found a video where Stockton was discussing that he controlled the submarine with a video game controller, a consumer-grade Logitech video game controller. And that kind of spooked my son, and rightfully so. And then he looked a little further and he found that he used a carbon fiber hull. And when he researched that, carbon fiber, when it's cycled through stress and pressure, gets compromised, delaminates, and shatters like glass. So he thought that was a terrible decision. Carbon fiber is supposed to be strong and lightweight, but in a submarine, weight isn't a consideration. So he wasn't quite sure why he used fiber, especially since it's so brittle and susceptible to pressure cycles. And we found that an employee raised concerns because there was a viewing window that the manufacturer rated to 1,500 meters in depth, and the dive we were going on was 4,500 meters, three times what the manufacturer spec was. And Stockton's response is that the industry is so over-engineered that there's a lot of wasted money. And yes, that's spec for 1,500 meters, and we're going 4,500 meters, but it's good to 10,000 meters, so we're still in that safe range. And that's kind of how he viewed everything, that because the industry was so over-engineered for safety, that at some point safety becomes a waste of money.
Now, I read a report that some of the previous trips were by the grace of God, didn't end up in a catastrophe. For example, one of his last trips, maybe the last one before this one, where the engine was put in backwards.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if that came up in the research, but the engine put in backwards, that's not a very self-assuring manifestation. This is going to be going well. I mean, the engine backwards of all the things, that's real crazy.
Well, and then we found that the hatch is attached by 18 bolts. Actually, there are 18 holes for 18 bolts. He generally used 16 or 17 because 18 he decided was not necessary. And it can only be opened from the outside. So if you had any kind of issue and you surfaced, you're still stuck in an airtight submarine with the inability to open it to escape the vessel.
Wow. By the way, 18 is Chai in Hebrew, so he didn't want to use the letter Chai. I find that pretty interesting. Chai is life. And
Yeah.
so what did the rest of your family think about you when you originally said you were going to go? What was their reaction?
Well, my son initially was excited until he got some more information. My wife thought it was very adorable that I thought I was going to be able to go.
Did she want to go too?
She did not want to go. She did not want me going. She did not want my son going.
But okay. But you said you want to go as a time to experience father and son bonding.
Yeah, I thought it'd be nice. So in February we started to raise these concerns, and I shared my son's concerns. So I questioned Stockton about the safety, and he flew out in March to meet me. And he took me through the Titanic exhibition at Luxor. We walked the exhibition, talking about what the excursion would look like. And then we had lunch, and over lunch we talked about what to expect, and then we touched on the safety concerns. And he was fairly dismissive, and he actually flew out. He told me he was flying his plane out to meet me, and that he would be meeting me in North Las Vegas, which I thought was a strange choice. Most people, when they come here, land at McCarran, it's now Harry Reid International, or in Henderson Executive.
So
But
why do you think
I've never
he
seen-
wanted to go there as opposed to where people normally go?
I asked him that, and he told me that he was flying in on a 2-seat experimental aircraft that he built. Now, I'm a pilot, and that is an entirely different risk appetite than I have. I wouldn't fly in an experimental aircraft. And then I thought about it, and I thought, here we have a gentleman flying in on a 2-seater experimental aircraft that he built to take me on a 5-seater experimental sub that he built to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. And started to really rethink this. So in April, he offered me seats on May trip. There are 2 dates in May, and he offered to discount the tickets by $100,000 each.
So it's $250,000 normally what he was charging. So he was going to give you a discount, so you'll pay only $150,000 per person.
Exactly. Correct.
And did he think that would entice you to come? Getting a discount?
He was addressing the wrong concern.
He thought it was a financial
My concern
reason
was
why
not
you
the
didn't want to
price.
go?
Well, if I think there's a good chance I'm going to die on this trip, dropping the price is not going to entice me to go.
Right.
But he was focused on the wrong issue.
But did he address the other safety concerns that you were bringing up?
No, he just minimized them by saying that, his industry way over engineers and wastes a lot of money in over engineering for safety.
Now, from what I understand, by the way, the Ocean Gate's website's still promoting future trips for $250,000. I don't think it's ever been taken down from the company.
I think that was prior to this tragedy, and just nobody took it down. This all happened so suddenly.
Now, when you heard that the implosion of this submarine, what was your reaction?
Well, it was like the top news story in the world for a period of time. And so everywhere I looked, whether it was online or social media or the news on television, I kept seeing the news of the implosion, and they would put up the pictures of the passengers. And there were 3 individual pictures of 3 individual people, and then a 4th picture of this father and son this Pakistani businessman and his son that took my son and my seat. And all I could think of is, but for the grace of God, that would be our picture on the television. It would be my family talking to the press. So it's really an eerie feeling.
Did it have any impact on you spiritually, religiously, knowing that you could have gone through this and only by the saving grace of God, you didn't go?
It made me think about what's really important. One of the things so Thursday, when they announced, last Thursday, a week ago Thursday, when they announced that everybody at board was lost, I reflected a bit, and I put up a Facebook post of my text messages with Stockton Rush, and I said, I finished my post with the thought that tomorrow is not promised, and I'm changing priorities in my life. So everybody gets so emotional and so upset, so passionate about politics and these petty squabbles that really don't matter. So I'm kind of reprioritizing how I use the time that I have.
No, it's an important, thing to do. Does that mean perhaps you can share with us? I know that you're Jewish. Are you involved religiously or Jewishly with Jewish organizations or synagogues? And does this experience or miss experience change your wanting to be even more involved?
So I was bar mitzvahed in an Orthodox synagogue, but I am ultra reformed. Um, so
I didn't know.
I'm
I didn't know this. I heard of ultra orthodox. I haven't heard of ultra reform.
I just made that up. No, I'm not. I don't practice, but it's more for me. It's more about the tradition, right? So we do have Passover seders, and we do attend temple on occasion, but uh, beyond that, it's more of a philosophical kind of awakening for me than a religious one.
Okay, because that's why I was wondering if you had this near death experience where God, thank God that you and your son were spared of that. That's why I was wondering if it had any, not just philosophical, but any spiritual or religious connotations for you to say, listen, maybe I should be more involved. I was just wondering about that out loud.
I think it had more of an impact on my son spiritually, um, but less so for me. It's more philosophical.
Have you had religious leaders reach out to you after the incident or near incident?
I've had religious media reach out to me, but not religious leaders.
We're speaking with Jay Bloom. He and his son Sean was supposed to be on that ill-fated submarine ride to the Titanic. Thank God that he and his son did not go, and that's why he's able to be here with our broadcast to talk about that. When we come back, we continue our conversation with billionaire Jay Bloom, who was spared the trip to the bottom of the ocean. If you'd like to participate, our phone numbers are 212 769 1925. 212 769 1925. Email is a wonderful way to have your questions answered. Zev at talklinenetwork.com. Zev at talklinenetwork.com. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to this episode of
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, on the air since 1981. Please call us with your questions and comments at 212-769-1925. That's 212-769-1925. Or email us at zevbrenner@gmail.com.
And we're back. Jay Bloom is our guest, a billionaire investor from Las Vegas. He and his son Sean were supposed to be on an ill-fated submarine trip to the bottom of the ocean to visit Titanic. By the grace of God, they were spared. We're taking your phone calls. Let's go to Aryeh in Flatbush. Aryeh, are you there?
Yes, hi. I just wanted to say to Mr. Bloom, I was a little bit disappointed to hear that you weren't religiously inspired by your experience. So I'd like to share some religious thoughts that I had about the whole thing. The Titanic was surrounded by a lot of arrogance at the time that it was built. They said it was unsinkable, and that could very well have played into why it sank, because they thought they were invincible. You're not supposed to do that. Now, connected with that, if Hashem in fact had anything to do with the sinking of the Titanic, we can refer back to the book in Shemos, Exodus, where the Egyptians were drowning in the sea, and the Israelites were rejoicing that their enemies were drowning, or the angels were rejoicing rather. And God reprimanded the angels and said, "Do not rejoice, do not sing while my creatures are dying. Do not exult while my creatures are dying."
So your point, Aryeh, is?
The point is to visit the scene of where people lost their lives and get some exultation out of that. Okay, that goes directly against this
No, but let me say, hold on. I don't think going to visit the Titanic, it's a curiosity thing where people want to see the boat. It was a magnificent ship at its time. It's a tragedy. We're never able to pull it up. So I'm not sure that's correct. I mean, I think
get a thrill. They get a thrill. They're not sharing the tragedy of lost lives.
I don't think that's what it. But I'll let Jay respond to you. I won't.
Yeah, I don't think that's a fair comparison. We're not rejoicing in the death of our enemies here. We're taking a very somber period of time and going to explore it. No different than going to see, the ships at Pearl Harbor or going to Arlington National Cemetery. We're going to see history and experience, a very important period in our history. But we're not celebrating the death of our enemies. That's not.
And by the way, I think there were some Jews, wasn't they, from the famous? What famous philanthropic family was on the Titanic?
So the Strauss family was actually there. I believe they were Jewish. The Strauss family.
Abraham Strauss family, from Abraham and Strauss, A&S.
So the Strauss family, they're actually partners in Macy's, and the great grandparents of Stockton Rush's wife were their Strausses, Ida Strauss and Isidore Strauss, and their story was actually told on the movie Titanic, where she got on the lifeboat, and they said, "We know who you are, sir. Would you like to get on the lifeboat as well?" And he said, "No, not until every woman and child are off this boat." And then the wife said she's not leaving without him. She got off the lifeboat, and the two of them died. Their great-great-granddaughter was Stockton Rush's wife.
Exactly. So, nobody's exalting from it. Listen, it's intriguing, and very few people. Do we know, by the way, how many people actually went to see the wreck of the Titanic? Do you have any idea, by the way?
There are less than 200 people. That was one of Stockton's pitches, that more people have been to space, and this is such a rare privilege to be able to go down and see this piece of history.
I'm sorry, you were saying?
So less than 200 people have been down to the wreckage, and Stockton was telling us that that's more people have been in space than that have been down to the Titanic, and that was part of the privilege of being able to go down and see this piece of history.
It's probably safer to go into space than to go to on the way Stockton had it. Because I think they have more procedures. Right? Any plans, by the way, going to space?
Okay. So I mean, this is how I explain it. If Elon Musk or Richard Branson or Jeff Bezos said, "Hey, do you want to go into space?" Yeah, probably. But if you told me that you built a rocket in your backyard and let's go, I would wish you the best and see you when you get back.
Are you in touch with Musk or any of these other individuals that you mentioned as far as maybe participate? Do you know them personally?
Actually, my son does, and then I have some nexus to Richard Branson, but my son knows Musk. Neither of us know Bezos.
Let's go to Ezra, my good friend Ezra Freeland in Borough Park, CEO of the Freeland Group. Good Vach.
Good work, Zev. Thank you. Fascinating program. I'd like to make a suggestion to Mr. Bloom. You know, it's too weighty subject to actually comment on religion and God's plans and all of that related subject. But what you could surmise is that you were kept alive for a purpose. And it's difficult for someone not in your shoes to understand how you would feel knowing that you could have been in that submarine.
Yeah.
Would you care to comment on whether this affected or will affect the way you look at your life going forward, in terms of you were kept alive for a purpose as a spiritual person, in a spiritual way, in a religious way, but just the fact that you were saved, and I assume that you believe in a supreme power, being a supreme being. Do you feel that will change the way you live your life? In terms of, do you feel that every day that you live now is a day gained, or do you just say, "Hey, well, I'm a lucky guy, and I just made the right decision without any input by God"?
I think that's a fair question. There's a couple of pieces to the answer. One, I draw a distinction between religion and organized religion. So while I do have some spirituality and my own beliefs about, some intelligence or supreme being, that's different than a temple or church or mosque or any organized religion, the Vatican, right? It's very different than individual beliefs. In terms of the rest of your question, yeah, I mean, it's changed the way I prioritize things in my life. Things that were, I'm less wrapped up in politics and petty squabbles going forward, because tomorrow is not promised. I heard somebody speak to a group of people, and they said, "If I offered you $10 million, who would take it?" And every hand in the room goes up. He said, "What if that meant you wouldn't wake up tomorrow?" And every hand in the room goes down. And he said, "So what you're telling me is tomorrow is worth more than $10 million to you." Right? And I thought that was a very interesting take on things, because we all take tomorrow for granted. But there's going to come a day for everybody that's listening to this where tomorrow doesn't come. We don't know when that's going to be. So, yeah, this experience has changed the way I kind of view what's important, what's a priority, and what do I do with my time.
Ezra?
In a way, not only are you very lucky, obviously, but that this experience is life altering. Not that many people have that ability to appreciate life the way you will now be able to appreciate life. It's really a gift from God.
It is. It is. I don't want to look back at the end and
Okay.
go, I spent my time the wrong way.
Anyway,
Okay.
Ezra,
I look forward to getting to know you, Mr. Bloom. Stay well.
Okay,
Likewise, thank you.
Good question. So I'm curious about something, Jay. You mentioned that you're not going to be involved in politics or petty things. You gave the impression that prior to this experience, you were involved in politics and petty things. Can you describe what that means? What were you involved previously, and how you're changing that now?
The whole, for the last, I would say, 6 years, it feels like the world is spinning out of control in terms of this us versus them mentality, and how people are disassociating with other people that have different beliefs than they have. And I've lost friends over politics. I've lost friends over different different opinions.
Are you a Republican, Democrat? Is that what you're referring to?
I am a moderate, and I tend towards the left in my moderation. But I'm a fiscal conservative and a social liberal, and really no party represents me nowadays. Both parties feel like they got hijacked. So I was a Reagan Republican, then I went independent, then I went Democrat. Now I'm back to nonpartisan because both parties are moving. I haven't changed. Both parties have moved away from me.
Would you say that they move away from the average American too?
Very much so. I think most people are fiscally conservative and socially liberal, and I think both parties have lost their way.
So, out of curiosity, what do you see as the future, and are you going to be involved in some endeavor to change things in that realm?
Yes, but not at the expense of relationships, and not at the expense of getting angry and getting emotional about some of these positions. I don't agree with a lot of the extremists, but at the same time, I'm not just going to delete them in social media and cut them out of my life just because of one opinion.
So, it'd be fair to say that because of this experience, you've become more tolerant of different people's beliefs and practices.
I think that's a result of rearranging my priorities in terms of what's important, right? Because what you're describing is a consequence of you know being emotionally vested in a position, and I'm less emotionally vested than most, but it's endemic right now in our society that Trump people stop talking to Hillary people, and Hillary people stop talking to Trump people, and Bernie people and Hillary people didn't get along for a while there, and
But
it
it's more
shouldn't
than
be.
just not talking, Jay. It's the hatred. I've seen the hatred where people, whether it's a right wing or left wing, where people say you have this perspective, and they write you off
I
completely.
know. I think it's insane. Both sides have lost their way.
Have you been to Israel, by the way?
I'm sorry.
Have you been to Israel?
Well, that's another thing I want to do. No, I haven't, and it's always something I wanted to do, and now I'm going to go do it.
But I hope you don't take a submarine to get there.
Now, well, to take a submarine from Las Vegas to Israel is going to be a very short trip.
No, but Israel is a wonderful country. We're speaking with Jay Bloom. He's a billionaire investor. He and his son Sean were supposed to be on that submarine to visit the remains of the Titanic, but by the grace of God, they decide not to go on that ill-fated trip. We come back, we continue our conversation. We continue to take some of your phone calls. 212-769-1925. 212-769-1925. Email's a wonderful way to get some of your questions answered. Zev@talklinenetwork.com. Zev@talklinenetwork.com. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to this episode of
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, on the air since 1981. Please call us with your questions and comments at 212-769-1925. That's 212-769-1925. Or email us at zevbrenner@gmail.com.
And we're back. Jay Bloom is our guest, billionaire investor. He and his son Sean were supposed to be on the ill-fated submarine ride to see the Titanic at the bottom of the ocean, and by the grace of God, they did not go on the trip, and they were spared. Jay, I'm curious, are you in touch or have been in touch with any of the members of the people that died going to that voyage?
Not directly. I was actually on a call with the sister of the Pakistani businessman and the aunt of his son. We were on Chris Cuomo together. We were on an interview together, and it was really heart-wrenching to, it's a tragic loss for that family and just an absolute catastrophe. And it's even more haunting knowing that I was one decision away from that being my family talking about myself and my son.
No, it must be. Every time you see a picture, I'm sure it must evoke that kind of image.
It does, and the pictures are everywhere.
You've been interviewed, I'm sure, by outlets around the world about this tragedy?
Yes.
Any from Israel, out of curiosity?
I'm sorry?
Any media outlets in Israel have interviewed you about this situation?
I don't think so. I think there are some global networks, so we got picked up, but no direct interviews, no.
Now, you mentioned that on your bucket list is to go visit Israel. Is this expedite that you're wishing to go? Is there anything that you're planning in the very near future to go to Israel?
It's becoming more of a priority. Again, in line of that thought that tomorrow is never promised. I don't want to wait and just have time pass me by and never have the opportunity to do it.
I'm sure your wife must have been ecstatic when she said that you were spared. Obviously, everybody is devastated by the loss of life, by the 5 lives that needn't have been lost because of, let's put it frankly, it's the carelessness of the owners of the trip, the Stockton Brush, who ignored, some safety concerns. I think more and more information is coming out, but I'm sure your wife and family must have been ecstatic that you didn't go on the trip.
Yeah, they're very relieved. I mean, they were worried because just in general, it's a high risk proposition. We had no idea how high risk until we did some research.
Now, tell us about yourself. I know you're in Las Vegas. We're speaking to you there. You certainly have done very well in business. Tell us about yourself growing up, your family, and some of your visions of life up until now.
I grew up on Long Island. And
where in Long Island?
In Plainview, Nassau County.
Okay.
And then my family moved to New Jersey when I was in high school. I went to Rutgers undergraduate and Fordham and Lincoln Center for my graduate and my MBA. My father grew up in Brooklyn. My mother grew up in Queens. So we've been there for a while. I spent the first 10 years after undergraduate at manufacturers Hanover Trust, and then we bought Chemical, and then we bought Chase, and then we bought JP Morgan. So I started at what today is JP Morgan Chase. I spent 10 years in banking and finance, left the bank, started my first company, and for the last 20 some odd years I've been doing everything from startup to mid-cap acquisition, venture capital. Now I have a family office and I'm doing real estate development projects and a whole host of different industries.
And thank God you've done well, because I know you're listed as a billionaire investor. So you've really started from scratch and built it up over the course of time.
I've been very fortunate. I've often said I'd rather be lucky than smart.
Well, you can be both, right?
It doesn't hurt.
It doesn't work that way. Okay. Now, you mentioned you grew up in Brooklyn and you had an Orthodox bar mitzvah. Was your home growing up traditional? How would you describe that from a religious point of view?
No, so my father is from Brooklyn and my mother is from Queens. I grew up on Long Island, and then in New Jersey. No, I mean, my parents' philosophy was they wanted me. I did 5 years of Hebrew school, and consummating in a bar mitzvah, and then they said they wanted to leave it to me to make my own decision about where I am on religion, and at what level I wanted to practice my faith. And but no, I didn't grow up in an Orthodox household. We belonged to an Orthodox temple, but it was an interesting time because we weren't an Orthodox family.
Which temple or which synagogue did you affiliate with in those days?
Oh, you're going back 40 years. I'd have to look at my bar mitzvah album.
Where in Brooklyn were you? Maybe
No, I was on Long Island.
your bar mitzvah was Lyle in Plainview.
There was a rabbi there that actually, after I got bar mitzvah, was indicted for tax evasion, which didn't help.
No, that didn't help your religious affiliation, right? When you saw that.
Well, not in terms of organized religion. And again, I differentiate between organized religion and personal religious beliefs.
Well, sometimes people say, "Well, if this religious leader did something wrong, then I don't want any part of it." I've heard that people said that before, even though
and I was a young teenager at the time, so it's like
it made an impression on you.
When your rabbi gets arrested, you get a little jaded.
Right. So that made you decide to become what you describe as ultra reform.
I was being somewhat facetious, but I am reformed.
And I hear that. It's so important because Jewish identity, I think, is important because you've seen, Jay, the rise of anti-Semitism in this country.
Absolutely.
And it's growing by leaps and bounds. I don't know what it's like in Las Vegas, but in New York, the numbers have been going through the roof in other areas. But New York has also the largest concentration of visible Jews. The Orthodox Jews are most visible. So I don't know what it's like in Las Vegas. Have you encountered anti-Semitism in the course of your professional career?
I have, but I've been fortunate. It's been very subtle. It hasn't been, in your face, so to speak. So I have been fortunate. But again, I come from New York, where it's a very different experience than if you're, down south in Alabama. So I'm very aware of the anti-Semitism that's not only here in the United States, but around the world. It's becoming, very prevalent in Europe, and it's disconcerting. Someone told me recently, as recent as last week, that they met somebody who said Orthodox, Reformed, to the outside, we're all Jews, and they don't differentiate. So they had a very good teacher, Adolf Hitler. Doesn't matter if you're Reformed or Orthodox, you're Jewish.
So what can we do to combat anti-Semitism?
I think we need to change the tone of how people interact. I think that's a symptom of where we are as a country and how we treat each other. I mean, people are not only anti-Semitic, they're anti-Muslim, they're anti-immigrant, they're anti-Hispanic. I mean, they're anti-everything. Everybody hates everybody, and it's just a terrible place for this world to be.
Right, but the Jews get a special thing. I forget it was a professor. I'm trying to remember his name. And basically, he sang a song with Tom Lehrer. Everybody hates the Jews. It's National Brotherhood. Everybody hates the Jews. Everybody hates one another, but everybody hates the Jews. Let's take some phone calls. Let's go to Susan in Brooklyn. Thank you for waiting your question for our guest.
First of all, I'm very glad that you and your son are spared, and I'm just curious if it changes the way you think about the charity you give, how much and to where.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit.
Please repeat the question.
I'll go to a different room and see if the phone will obey a little better. My question is, Mr. Bloom's giving of charity, has this experience changed so much you give and where you give it?
So I really haven't spoken publicly about my charitable activities, and I mean, I'm fairly active in terms of donating my time and my resources to charities around the world, and I plan on continuing to do that as long as I'm around.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Okay. I just wondered if, in his going forward, that this experience changed anything about that in terms of either amount or where.
Your question.
Yeah, it hasn't really changed it so much as reaffirmed that I'm doing the right thing in the charitable efforts that I undertake now.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Any of them are Jewish charities, by the way?
Some.
Okay. So, and I'm sure when you go to Israel, I'm sure that may have a different perspective for you when you get to the Holy Land. I'm sure it could be a life-changing event as well.
It could be. I have family there. I have friends there, and I know people that have gone there and come back very different people.
Right, especially young people when they go, they have a birthright to trip as well. What will you say is your biggest challenge now that you've gone through this experience in the day-to-day life? What's your biggest challenge?
Maintaining that understanding of trying to differentiate. It's important to differentiate what's really important versus what's just an emotional reaction. Because emotion is really taking people on a roller coaster ride of tangents and distracting them from what's important.
So, basically speaking, your life has been changed in lots of different ways. Have your business associates commented you? What's been the reaction from the business community?
My Facebook post took on a life of its own, and over the past week, it's been fairly visible in media. So I'm getting calls not only from business associates that I deal with currently, but I'm getting calls from people going back 30, 40 years that I haven't talked to in decades. And it's rekindling some very old relationships, which is nice.
No, that is nice. It's certainly a life-altering situation. Are you planning on writing a book, by the way?
If I wrote a book, this would be one chapter.
What would the other chapters be about?
I did a project in Las Vegas called the Las Vegas Mob Experience, where I bought up the estates of all the gangsters, Mickey Cohen, Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, and put them on display. And in the process, I interacted with all of their children and spouses and nephews and grandchildren. And I collected all the stories of their notorious relatives. And it's quite a collection of stories that I've assembled from the families of these mobsters. That would be another chapter.
Well, the Jewish mobsters built Las Vegas, right?
I know. I got yelled at when I did this by the Italian American Club in Las Vegas, and I said, slow your roll. The gangsters that I'm putting in are Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel and Mickey Cohen. Like I don't think I think I have maybe one of five that's Italian.
Yeah, some good. We've done some shows on some of the Jewish mobsters, and there's one book called "He Was Good to His Mother." They have a whole collection of Jewish mobsters. But the interesting thing is that their lifestyle didn't carry on to the next generation. They encouraged their kids not to be in their lifestyle.
That's very true. I actually called out the Italian American Club and said, "Shame on you for thinking everybody's Italian when I say mafia. It's stereotyping the Italians."
Menachem in Maplewood, New Jersey. Your question for our guest. Go ahead, Menachem.
Yes, Zev, thank you for a great program as always. Mr. Bloom, it's certainly heartwarming to be able to speak to you. Of course, that's a tremendous understatement. I'm theorizing that without your son researching it as much as he did, that you might have gone on that trip alone. Would that have been possible? Do you think that would have been possible?
It's entirely possible. It was him and his conversation with his friend that sparked the research, and he brought it to my attention, all of the things that he was finding that I had overlooked initially. Whether or not I may have come across this information on my own later without them is pure speculation. I just don't know.
And as a follow-up,
Go ahead.
as a follow-up, do you think that your taking of risk as an investor normally has to do, risk reward, etc. Do you think that will change the way you view your prior dealings with risk?
You know, that's an interesting question. When I do a business deal, I do a risk reward analysis and I diligence what the risk is. In this particular instance, because it was experiential and not an investment, you really didn't do the diligence, at least not at inception. You know, the value proposition was very intriguing. It was something I could do for my son, who is a Titanic fan. You know, he's enamored with the story of the Titanic ever since he was a little kid. So for me, it was an enticing proposition, and I didn't treat it like a business deal where you diligence what the risks are. I just looked at the benefit, and in retrospect and going forward, I'm going to diligence things even if they're not business deals, because there are risks that are inherent that if you don't look for them, you won't see them.
Malcolm, thank you for a very good question.
Would
Go
you
ahead.
ever consider skydiving?
So I'm a helicopter pilot, and I had a helicopter operation one time, and there was a skydiving company that wanted to do skydiving jumps in our path, and they invited me to go skydiving as their guest. And I declined because I see no reason to leave a perfectly good aircraft mid-flight.
Fantastic. Now you're talking. Thank you very much. Stay well.
And thank you for a very
You
good
as
question.
well.
I appreciate it. I was just wondering, as we're listening to Menachem's question to you, Jay. So you said you didn't. Were you taking at face value when the CEO of Stockton Rush of Ocean Gate, when he invited you on the trip, were you taking his assurances? If your son would have intervened, were you accepting what he was saying about the safety of the submarine and about, his experience? So if it wouldn't have been for your son, it seems like you would have gone.
It's entirely possible. I mean, I can only speculate as to whether or not I would have diligenced it myself if I wasn't prompted. But it's very possible that I would not have, because it's not an investment. It's just an experience. And you make a lot of assumptions when you go on an experience that it's vetted and regulated and safe. And, I'm fine taking risks, but they need to be calculated risks and educated risks. And there was a lot here. When Stockton told me that the industry of non-military subs has a perfect safety record with no accidents, no injuries for 35 years. Yeah, I took that at face value. I didn't stop and consider that he's only been doing it for 2 years and he's deviated from the industry standard. So that industry record doesn't apply to what he's doing. I just heard the industry record and assumed that he was doing the same thing, but he wasn't.
Jay Bloom is our guest, billionaire investor. He grew up in Brooklyn. They was actually Nassau County. He's in Las Vegas right now, and he was supposed to be on that ill-fated submarine trip to the Titanic with his son Sean. By the grace of God, he was spared. Our final conversation with Jay right after these messages. Stay tuned. And if you'd like to participate, our phone numbers are 212-769-1925. 212-769-1925. Email zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. A program note, today is Sunday. We're also on WOR 710 AM and iHeart radio station. And we've been rated number 3 in New York right after WCBS 880 AM. We're on with you tonight from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. Before we get to our guest, let's go to Dov Sherm for the latest updates from Israel. Good morning to you, Dov, in Jerusalem.
Good morning to you, Zev. Good morning to the listeners. I'm sorry. I kind of was hot night last night, and I overslept. So I'm going to just do a quick report and tell you, first of all, Dov Sherm is sponsored by Quality Carpet. The king of carpeting, and summertime is upon us. It's a great time to either carpet your or new carpeting or new flooring for your summer home or for your all-year home. Right now, they've got 20 cruising trucks serving you in the tri-state area at the king of carpeting quality at that new location where they now feature free parking for customers only. They're located at 1416 38th Street in Brooklyn, right outside of Borough Park. And the telephone number of the King of Carpeting Quality is 718-941-4200, 718-941-4200. And the news is, like we say, the same news as yesterday, only a day later, but there's great news that Israel's young soccer team, the game went on forever. It kept going to overtimes. It went on for 2 hours. But Israel came out with a victory, and if they have one more victory this coming Wednesday night, big thing in Israel is not American football or baseball. It's soccer, which they call football. And all they got to do is win Wednesday night, and they'll be in the Olympics next year. They got graduated. They got congratulated by the president of the state, and of course the prime minister also, and everybody in Israel is thrilled by that. I want to just tell you about the Good Chumash. Another 2 weeks. Do we have a double portion this coming week? I didn't know this. I know that it's the last night for Kiddush Levana, by the way. But you had 2 portions and caught up to us finally. We had just Balak and you had Chukas and Balak. But now we're getting to the end of the Torah, actually, because the Torah is 4 books. The 5th book is Mitzvah Torah written by Moshe Rabbeinu in the last 37 days of his life. It's an amazing book, and the Good Chumash, it does such a great job translating with Rashi in their translation, and they bring many commentaries, many questions, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And just to give you a taste, the Rebbe said years ago in one of his minors that the difference between Balak and Moshe Rabbeinu, we see it in the portion. Balak goes and scares his people to death about the Am Yisrael. This nation is eating up everybody, in this, whatever, and he's really scaring the people. Where Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he had to go fight Og, who had a source that Og, told Abraham and Sarah that Lot was captured and this and that, and instead he did not bring fear to the people, even though he knew that Og, has an advantage because he did something good for Abraham, for Abraham. Still, he kept the leadership in the center of his talk, and he did not scare the people. That's what the Rebbe says. It's a great sefer, the Good Chumash, a must for every Jewish home, available at all your local farm stores, in the web at callmenachem.com, or call 1-888-580-1900. Okay, this is Dov Sherm from Israel. Love you all. Have a great week.
Thank you, Dov Sherm, with the latest news. Okay, we're back. Our guest is Jay Bloom, just for a little while longer, a billionaire investor. He and his son Sean were supposed to be on the ill-fated submarine to visit the Titanic at the bottom of the ocean. By the grace of God, they were saved. Jay, I know that you and your son were going to go on this voyage as a bonding father and son, and thank God you didn't go on this one. Are you planning any father and son bondage instead of what you said of this submarine? Is there anything that's in the works?
Yeah, we're talking about taking a couple of months and just traveling the world, actually. So we're putting together an itinerary that hits pretty much every continent and all of the things in each stop that we want to see and do.
Let's go to Ellie in Lakewood, New Jersey. Ellie, good luck. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the great program and great guests. Unfortunately, this, like to say, tragedy brings Jews of all stripes together. And like Mr. J. Bloom, good evening, said, like, the Germans didn't make a difference what type of Jew we were. And I was very touched by his sincerity in all areas of his life. But I want to invite him to do due diligence on his heritage of the Jewish people who have been living, for 1,000 years in Europe, undisturbed, basically living there until Hitler came in and threw us off the continent, to do the research on to separate the message of Judaism, which is truth, and sometimes from an Orthodox upbringing that may have not been, typical or pristine, or they're contradictory, but the messages sometimes are not always straight, but the message is definitely truth. And to do some research, I would want to recommend you Roy Neuberger's website and book called To Sinai. He himself was someone that was very successful, that searched and went back to his roots. And you did mention something. I said, my first bank was Manufacturer Hanover. So I said, you worked at Manufacturer Hanover. I definitely can relate. That was my first passbook saving.
Well, thank you for the insight. I will definitely check it out.
And by the way, it's on our website. We had him as a guest just the other week. He and
I have to work. And if you'd like, I welcome you. If you want to be in touch, I can definitely steer you on your trip to Israel or anything you'd like. I'd be happy to return to you what's truly yours.
Well, thank you. We'll figure out through the program how to do that.
Anyway, thank you for a good question, Ellie.
Okay, I'll pass my information, my contact info.
Okay, thank you.
Or email. Okay, thank you.
No, by the way, when you go to Israel, there is a tremendous, experience. I remember the first time I went. I think it'll be a life-changing, and it'll be a wonderful experience. So, if we could be of any assistance in getting you to meet some of the interesting people, they were happy to be part of that. It's a great, great experience, and I recommend as soon as you can go. I think it's just going to Jerusalem and the Kotel and the Wall and seeing the country and the culinary delights. I think you'll really enjoy it because it sounds like you're attuned to going to Israel at this point in your life.
Oh yeah, no, I'm very much looking forward to it, and there's a lot there that I want to see and do and experience. So, while I'm not big in terms of practice, I am big in terms of religion, and I identify definitely as Jewish and relate to my Jewish heritage. I see that as very different than practicing the religion. So there's a tradition in the heritage that's very important to me.
No, and I would be correct if I was assuming that this experience you had makes you want to go to Israel more, and whether it's a religious experience or not, but certainly you want to connect to your people, to our people, by going to Israel.
I do, and it's. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a religious experience or not. I'm certainly not going in with any preconceptions. I'm going to go.
It'll be a spiritual experience. You get to experience the country of God. It's our land. Have you been involved? You mentioned involved politically in the United States. Have you been involved at all in politics in Israel?
I really have not. Again, I think that's a function of not having been there yet. It's always something I can do later. And, from this experience, I'm not going to take tomorrow for granted anymore.
Did you ever have ambitions to running for public office prior to this?
I've been asked before. I generally joke around and say I run from office, not for office.
Running from sheriff, right? But did you, because it sounded like you were involved politically before this, and now you're changing your priorities where you're seeing what's right, and some of the partisan politics that we have in this country, I think it's tearing the country apart. I've seen many elections, and I remember, dealing with, when Obama was president, but nothing compares to the present time where the hatred and the rancor among people. And I can tell you that on my Shabbat table, the only time I had somebody almost hit each other was a Hillary supporter wanted to hit Donald Trump supporter. We had them both sitting at the same table. I've never seen anything like it. And I hope things change, but I'm not sure it's going to happen in the very near future.
I tend to agree with you. I think, the dialogue is stopped, and people insulate themselves with like-minded people, and there's no exchange of ideas anymore.
Right. They don't want to. By the way, and I wasn't always a big fan of the American Civil Liberties Union, but one thing that I admired, they always championed the unpopular cause. If they didn't believe in it, they championed it. Today, they've changed. They only will champion causes that they believe in. They won't champion causes that they find inimical to their beliefs. So it's changed. Our country has changed, I think, for the worse in that sense, that we don't really want to deal with ideas and opinions that are not ours or like ours.
I tend to agree, and I have some insight on this because I have exposure to these people. I've had dinner with Hillary and Bill. I've had dinner with Obama when 2016 when he was a sitting president. I've spent some time with Trump. I know these people, and I see them very differently. And it's amazing how different they are when there's not a camera in the room.
Tell us, what are they like when there's not a camera in the room? What do you see the personal as opposed to the public persona?
Hillary is wonderful, and Bill is wonderful. When there's a camera, she kind of shrinks away from it. I mean, she's small in stature, so she gets kind of overwhelmed by press and cameras. She when I had dinner with her in 2016, she was telling me about her 87-point plan, and I said, "You need that to do the job, but that's not going to get you the job. Nobody has patience for 87 points and reading through, what you really need to actually get the job done. So what you need to do is figure out a message that you can fit on a hat, because that's where Donald Trump got it right. That's the attention span of the American public today, right? Donald Trump knew how to get the job, but not how to do the job. Hillary knew how to do the job, but not how to get the job. I think it's going to be very difficult to find a person that can do both."
Solomon, Brooklyn, your question and comment for our guests. Go ahead.
Hi, it's a privilege to speak with you, and may God grant you many, many more years of life and your family. I just wanted to mention this. We see an interesting message in the Torah. When you look throughout the Torah of places that have been destroyed with destruction, Hashem tells us, don't look back. Remember the place where Lot came from? The Malachim told him, don't look back.
That's the angels.
But she did look back. She did look back, and she became a pillar of salt. Which means what I'm trying to imply is that Titanic was destroyed, and therefore perhaps it's not favorable by Hashem that when people go and visit these destructive areas, we have to our job as a Jew. I'm not here I'm not a rabbi, but it's to rebuild our life in Israel and the Jewish nation. But to go and revisit destructive places, maybe it's not favorable. Maybe that's probably what was the message of this outcome. That it's not favorable to visit these destructive areas.
I would suggest that there's an alternative viewpoint, right? Because we all have a duty never to forget. And I would hate to see them develop Auschwitz into a condo development, right? So when there's tragedy, it's important that we understand it and remember it and appreciate it and not necessarily look back, but keep it in our memories so that we don't repeat the same mistakes. So I think I understand what you're saying and I appreciate your position, but I think there's an alternative position that's equally valid.
Okay, I just wanted to put that out.
Okay. Thank you for your phone call. By the way, have you visited the concentration camps? Jay?
Have I?
Yes.
I have not visited the concentration camps, no. But I certainly would find it very fascinating to do so.
I think right now to be the fact, and I think there's a lot of individuals go to the concentration camps and from there go to Israel. So you see the devastation, the destruction, and you see the miracle of Israel's rebirth after 2,000 years.
I can tell you, I've been through the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., and it was one of the most sobering experiences I've ever had. Walking through the train car that went to the concentration camps and seeing the piles of shoes and glasses. And I mean, it's just, it's not a question of looking back, but it's a question of never forgetting.
Right. Well, I think one of the biggest problems that we have in our generation, Jay, is that a lot of Jewish children are not getting a Jewish education. They don't know about the Holocaust. They don't appreciate the state of Israel. And we're facing, now I mentioned anti-Semitism earlier, but I think one of the biggest challenges we face is the assimilation, the acculturation, where we're losing our sense of who we are because of the lack of Jewish education, lack of Jewish knowledge. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, I would agree that there's I mean, assimilation is important to a degree, but not to the point where you lose your sense of self.
And I think we were, unfortunately, a lot of us have lost it in this country where they don't have that Jewish identity. It's unfortunate. I come across people that, in fact, I had interviewed Ed Asner before he passed away. He also, by the way, had an Orthodox background growing up. He had a bar mitzvah, and he told me he didn't even celebrate Hanukkah at the end. And I asked him, "Do you remember anything from bar mitzvah?" And he goes, "No." And then he starts singing Baruch Hu es Hashem Hamavorach. So it came to him, but he hasn't thought about it in God knows how long. So it's unfortunate. It's part of the American experience where people have some exposure or no exposure, and they just lose it. So I'm glad to see that you're connecting and going to be going to Israel with your family. I think it's so important. And we appreciate you being here with us, and we look forward to having you back. I'm waiting for the book to come out. I know you have one chapter about what happened with the Titanic, but I'm sure you have a lot more to write about politics or reflections. And before I let you go, you mentioned how you liked Hillary and she shrunk when the cameras came around. What were your impressions of Donald Trump and Obama?
So Donald Trump and Obama, they're amazing in their personalities, and Bill Clinton as well. I think they're some of the best speakers and the most captivating people. They can enter a room and just completely own the room.
Well, I never seen anybody as charismatic as Bill Clinton, by the way. He had it. I mean, he made you. I once went to I interviewed him before he became president. I went to his birthday party. I think it was his 50th birthday party, one of those birthday parties. He shook my hand. I said, "Mr. President, I don't know if you remember me, but I interviewed you before you became president." He didn't say a word to me. He shook my hand. Without saying I felt, "Buddy, I feel you. I feel your pain. I love you." And I'm a guy. I just felt it the way he clasped my hand. He is tremendously charismatic. Never met anybody like him.
And I'm sure he remembered you. He was gifted in that regard. He remembers everybody. It's incredible. So Bill Clinton is a lot of fun. Obama is extremely intelligent. And Donald Trump is funny and charming, but also very, very coarse. He can be very abrasive, and he's just so self-absorbed. And Trump is an anomaly. I mean, a lot of middle America thinks that The Apprentice was actually a documentary. It is not.
It was his training to be president. What about Joe Biden? Have you met with him?
I spent some time with Joe. Joe strikes me as somebody who's really trying to do the right thing. He's not sophisticated like Obama. He's not charming like Trump or Clinton. He's just a blue-collar guy that's trying to do the right thing.
Jay, we appreciate you being here with us. What is your Hebrew name?
So I was born on an Air Force base in Japan. So we had this discussion when I was bar mitzvahed, and I think we settled on Yaakov.
Yaakov. That's a nice name. Yeah, it's a patriarch. So, Jay Yaakov Bloom, thank you for being with us. Look forward to having you back, and I'm glad that you and your son were spared from going on that ill-fated voyage on the submarine to the bottom of the sea to see the Titanic. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be able to be here.
And we'll look forward. We'll have you back again. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
And there you have